Mass migration is still a problem in this country. The open borders crisis, the allocation of all these people that we can't do background checks, we can't facilitate a means of tracking who we're letting into this country, who are we vetting for visas. It's just been an absolute disaster. And people are well aware about this. I have been outspoken about this. I'm not anti-immigrant. I support people if they come legally into this country and want to help support and value and want to be a part of this nation, then I allow for that. But this mass migration, the open borders policy that is afflicting everybody has just been an absolute disaster, except for the billionaire class, because those are the people that want to facilitate this. Those are the people that are demanding for these open borders because they want to subsequently just, one, divide the population so that people are angry at each other. Two, they want to replace the workforce with cheaper labor. And three, and we know this from certain politicians that have stated this, that they want to use migrant people for military because they realize the recruitments are low. So there's multiple reasons why they're allowing this to happen. And let's just take a trip down memory lane for a second to remind people about this. So remember this initiative, the Century Initiative, this NGO started up by a BlackRock investor by Mark Weissman, who is now Mark Carney's right-hand man. So this guy and Mark Carney, who came together with this NGO that wanted to bring the population of Canada to a substantial number by the end of the century. This is him at one of their events here. And just to remind people that they once said that we can't vet people. We can't have proper border protection. We can't have proper border security and checkpoints because it's a time waster. It's a time waster to see who we're allowing into the country because the billionaires, the people that are pressuring the legislators and pressuring lawmakers and policymakers to open the borders, they want cheap labor. They want cheap labor now. They want exploitation now. And they're demanding this NGO to crack down the government to allow for more migrants to come through the border. So let's just remind people of this.
Part of the answer here is a private sector answer. Let the private sector move to bring people in and facilitate them being able to do that. And a lot of the screening and other stuff that we do, frankly, is just bureaucracy. It's a waste of time. Let's let people in by and large, and if we have to do the screening ex post, that's fine.
It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time to figure out where they came from, if they speak English, if they have a criminal record so they won't impose crimes into our communities. It's a waste of time. It's a bunch of bureaucracy. That's why we got to privatize this measure. So he's revealing the game to you. He's revealing the game that this is a private measure. These are private corporations that are involved in the scandal to open up the borders, to flood our country with migrants for cheap labor access, for temporary foreign workers, for all this stuff, for fake visas that the schools can benefit from. The colleges and university campus, they international students pay higher tuitions than domestic students. So they're benefiting from this. So all these key players that are also involved with this are saying that it's a waste of time to vet these people, to actually have proper migration, to have proper legal immigration that we've had for years, that we've had since the formation of this country. He's saying it's a waste of time now.
I can tell you, bad guys and bad women probably find their way into this country through means other than applying through permanent residency. like, let's just face that, right? So
he's saying that because a couple people slipped through the cracks and able to get in illegally, we can't have a system. So what's the point? What's the point of having borders then? What's the point of having border security? Because a couple people are, slipped behind the cracks. So let's just let everybody in. Let's not have a system. Let's not have legality. Let's not have a just border situation, which is exactly what the billionaires want. Let's remember people that Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders, the lefty, the lefty guy in the United States, went on to talk about this when he was asked about open borders. He says it was Koch brothers' idea. So liberals are not against having proper border protection. Many liberals support this. Many conservatives support this. The majority of the country supports having proper immigration services, having proper vetting of who we're allowing into this country. And we're not anti-immigrant. None of us are anti-immigrant. We understand that immigrants, a lot of our ancestors came to this country as legal immigrants. So you need to have a vetting system, because without it, you don't have a country. You don't have a country if you don't have borders. And what this asshole is saying, this BlackRock douche, is revealing is that they don't want protection. They don't want borders. They don't view Canada as a country. It's a vessel for their globalist empire. So he's just revealing the game there that, hey, we want to privatize this measure. We don't care about vetting people. It's all bureaucracy. It's all red tape and crap. And we want to diminish that so we can just pour in as many people as possible. That's the Century Initiative for you, ladies and gentlemen, that Mark Wiseman and Mark Carney are a part of. But now, there's a different tone. National Post puts out here, it says, Canadian government hitting the brakes on population growth by drastically cutting incoming immigration has eased the pressure on housing and labor markets. That's from a new TD report. One of the top banks in the country came out with this. So it says, Ottawa hitting the brakes on population growth by drastically cutting incoming immigration has eased the pressure on social and economic infrastructure, according to a newly released report from TD Economics. Last year, notes TD, government policymakers acknowledged that the influx of immigration was too high relative to the ability of Canada's social and economic infrastructure to cope. Unemployment rose more than a full percentage point between 2022 and 2024, while businesses struggled to keep up with a rapidly expanding supply of workers. Meanwhile, housing affordability was being stretched to its limits. In response, the government introduced an immigration plan to right-size non-permanent residents and permanent resident targets to allow for some time to catch up in the needed infrastructure. So that was when Justin Trudeau and Mark Miller finally got their heads on straight and said, we got to take a pause. They didn't say we got to fix the crisis. They didn't say we got to do new legislating to crack down on the mass migration problem, the exploitation. They didn't say that, but they said we got to take a pause, and then demanded more and more companies kept up with the increase. So it doesn't resolve the problem. It just takes a short break. Just like all the ceasefires that happen in Gaza, it's a short break. It doesn't mean that Israel is going to stop firing at Gaza, because they're still doing it right now. In response to the government introduced a plan. Oh, we already read that. That policy shift in evident by a massive tampering in Canada's population growth from a multi-decade high of 3.2% in second quarter to just 0.9%. Now, the TD Economics say the question is whether that the policy shift will achieve the intended outcomes for housing and the labor markets. The short answer is yes. Reducing the number of immigrants can relieve housing market pressures a few ways, he writes. In the rental market, drastically lower immigration bears out TD's softer rent growth forecast 3 to 3.5% in 2026, which is roughly half the growth rate of 2024. Lowering the cap on the newcomers has also lowered condo demand for both home ownership and the secondary rental market, and has also caused downward pressure in asking rents across major cities. Wrote, I don't know how to say that, Currency and I don't know how to pronounce it. The largest shifts were observed in BC and Ontario due to the higher proportion of temporary foreign workers and students. Those markets also have the highest supply of condo units, where the secondary market was previously attracted to investors. Calculating the impact of immigration flows on home pricing is a more nuanced exercise. For one, NPRs, so that's the non-permanent residents, have limited participation in the ownership market. And when they do, NPRs usually opt for condominium units, so a reduction in NPR inflows carries the greatest weight on this segment of the market. Aside from NPRs, writes TD Economics, the data shows that recent immigrants are slightly more attracted to in-home ownership during the initial years in Canada, with a preference for detached homes. By their fifth and sixth year, they note immigration ownership rates tend to converge toward 50-50 toward renting. Turning to the labor market, an increase in immigration during the pandemic recovery period. So yes, that's just to remind people, this is why this all started. So when the pandemic was happening and you were told to shut down, you were told that most of you were going to lose your job, you were going to get, there was going to be mass unemployment and mass layoffs, and you were told to hunker down because of this pandemic. They brought in a bunch of migrants when things are starting to open up to replace those workers. They brought in a huge amount of migrants at a time when Canadians were being told to hunker down. They got to lose your job, lose your employment, and rat this out. At the same time, they were importing a bunch of people that we didn't know were even vaccinated. We brought them into the country to replace the workers that were working at these facilities. Because according to Mark Miller, who was the immigration minister at the time, told you that we had to do this because otherwise we'd be in a recession. Well, the joke's on him, because we've been in a recession for a couple of years now. We've been in a dooming recession for a couple of years now because of this. Because of this decision. Instead of actually investing into Canadians and investing into the Canadian workforce, they replaced them. That's what's causing all this. So turning to the labor market, an increase of immigration during the pandemic recovery period helped address shortages in key sectors of the economy. In the beginning, Canadian employees showed capacity to integrate the new workers. However, this capacity was exhausted as labor force growth approached nearly 4 times its pre-pandemic growth rate, says those two. And by the middle of last year, there was plenty of evidence to show labor markets were cooling. Job vacancy rates were normalized, employment growth moderated, and the unemployment rate pushed higher. So, all the companies that were laying off people during the pandemic, they replaced you with a temporary foreign worker so they could profit off of exploiting that person, which is then demonizing the Canadian who could make it into this country, which is deteriorating the middle class economy of this country, which is why more and more Canadians, working class Canadians, are getting poorer. They're getting poorer because they don't have an income. And when they don't have an income, they can't invest more into the country. So Canada is literally self-deleting itself through this process. They're replacing you with cheap in-source labor. And the reason that they're doing that is because large corporations like Tim Hortons, for example, we have shown this before, Tim Hortons is taking advantage of this because they don't have to pay a living wage. They don't have to give benefits to a temporary foreign worker. They can exploit and abuse them at any point in term because they're not a Canadian citizen. They're not abide to labor laws that are provided for Canadians. They can exploit and abuse temporary foreign workers. That's what a lot of these corporations are doing. And no one talks about this except for maybe Rebel News. No one talks about this except for Rebel News and podcasters. No mainstream media outlet bothers to touch about this. That Tim Hortons, that fast food chains, that farms, that many industries are personally profiting off of this, while it's diminishing the actual foundation of this country, which is a strong middle class. And if you don't have a strong middle class, you're wiping out this entire system of Canada. And it's going to become a dystopian feudalist society where you're the peasant and the billionaires get further ahead, further advanced in the riches. So, as Concerned Citizen pointed out, he said, this is crazy. Canada took in 817,000 people into the country in just 4 months. We showed you that. That was under Mark Carney. That was under Mark Carney when he just got elected. He took in 817,000 more people at a time where we're supposed to be taking a pause. 817,000 people in the country in just 4 months. Canada's total population is now 40 million people. Now Canadians can't get jobs, buy or rent property, and access to services is in a rapid decline. This is all the cue for one of their job centers. Politicians have betrayed us all. So he shows a video here. This is an LCBO that I guess had a job placement sign or help wanted. And look at the people lined up at this one LCBO to apply for a job here. Look at this. Look at how many people are squished in. And that went around the block. Just for one position at an LCBO, because 817,000 newcomers came into this country without documentation, without proper vetting, without proper scrutiny, and it's just caused an absolute disaster. But companies are enjoying this because, hey, you're not from here, so I can pay you temporary wages. I don't have to pay you a living wage. I don't have to pay you the $36 I promised in a job placement ad. I can exploit you. And that's why I've been saying that I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm not against, people coming in this country that want to seek a better opportunity. I feel bad for these people the same way I feel bad for Canadians that get exploited. Everyone gets exploited through this scheme. And the people that do this are the billionaire class, are the capitalists, are the people at the top 1% that are purposely designing this scheme to further exploit the country, that are allowing for open borders, that are demanding Mark Carney's government, the donor class, demanding the government to keep the borders open and flooding in with more migrants. This is why. Here's Mario Nafila, who says Canada's immigration graph just turned into a rocket ship. Canada's bringing in 2.5 million people in 2025. It's the biggest peacetime immigration spike for a century in its size. The chart literally goes vertical after 2021. After 2021. You mean when things were starting to open up during COVID, after you were told to lose your jobs, that small businesses were going to be shut down? 70% of them, just in Toronto alone, never reopened. So all these people lost their jobs. They got laid off. They got told to bunker down because of a pandemic. And then they brought in a huge amount of people to then go in and replace those jobs. You don't think that's kind of nerve-wracking? You don't think that's a scheme? You don't think that this is part of the agenda? That they deliberately did this? And it says Blinken population jumps 25%. At this rate, Canada's about to gain a whole new Toronto every year. Hope they're building houses faster than that line is climbing. Well, it turns out they're not. And that's why housing is an absolute mess. That's why people within this country that work endlessly cannot afford to buy a home. They can't afford to live. They can't afford the cost of living. Inflation, everything is going up in a drastic rate. And it's because stuff like this gets mixed in to this horrendous agenda that is purposely demonizing and wiping out the very foundations of Canada. Because this is all part of this technological feudalist takeover done by globalists like Mark Carney and Mark Weissman of BlackRock, who don't give a damn about Canada in the first place. That's why they're able to do this. So here's the graph. Here's the graph there. You can see how much of a jump this has been. Goes from 1950 and goes on and on. A bit of uptake in the 90s, a little bit more in 2000s. Okay, not so bad. And then look at, by 2020, 2021, whew! Massive increase. And they did purposely, because Mark Miller even admitted that they did it intentionally to save the country from an economic recession, because they shut everything down during the pandemic, which we now know was completely mismanaged, that they didn't need to do it. That was completely on them. That was completely a self demolition to destroy the Canadian economy. They did it intentionally, and they didn't have to do it. And now we're dealing with this. So this is all intentional. This is all part of the process that Century Initiative, that Mark Weissman, that Mark Carney, and others are participating in this. Here's Blender News saying mass migration to continue under Mark Carney. So Justin Trudeau said he was going to pause mass migration as he was leaving the door. And we thought that, Mark Carney was going to continue that. But it turns out that pause immediately went away when Mark Carney stepped into office. Why? Because the central banker is going to continue on the process. Mark Carney is part of the Century Initiative. Did you really think he was going to continue on that short pause of mass migration, of a population boom that's affecting people, but is a benefit for, corporations that want to exploit? So here's Blender News talking about it. It's in detail here.
Migration and open border policies didn't end with Trudeau. They're set to accelerate under Prime Minister Mark Carney. Between January and March 2025, Canada processed 28,880 asylum claimants through both the CBSA and IRCC. That amounts to over 320 people per day. If this pace continues, the country is on track to process more than 115,000 asylum seekers in a single year, a historic record that dwarfs previous decades. The vast majority of these claimants are not spread evenly across the country. Ontario received 14,090, nearly half the total, followed by Quebec with 9,305, and British Columbia with 2,975. That's 92% of all asylum claimants concentrated in just 3 provinces. Alberta took in 1,730, while every other province and territory barely registered. To understand how dramatic this shift is, compare it to the years 2010 to 2014, when asylum claims averaged just 10,000 to 15,000 annually. In 2013, there were just over 10,000 claims in total, about the same amount Canada now processes in a single month. And make no mistake, this isn't accidental, it is ideological. At the World Economic Forum in 2016, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau proudly told global elites,
"Now, many of you have reached out to me recently in thanks for Canada's compassionate response to the Syrian refugee crisis. But let me tell you something. When I welcomed those first families to Toronto last month, I welcomed them as new Canadians and as the future of the Canadian economy."
That wasn't a statement.
It's funny how compassion doesn't include stopping the wars. Isn't that kind of interesting? Oh, we're compassionate. We're bringing in Syrian refugees that are in a war-torn country. Again, I feel bad. I don't dismiss, not helping people at a time of need. But there's no directive to actually ending the war. There's no directive to actually stopping the facilitation of why this war even exists. We know that the Syrian war was manufactured. We know we've been lied to about why people were fighting in Syria, why there was so much death, why there was so much gore. Just like Libya, just like Iraq, just like Afghanistan, just like all of them. There's no initiative to stop the war, that people can live freely in their homeland, which is all they want out of this. Not a lot of people want to live their home territory to go to another country that they have no idea how to process. No compassion for that, but we're gonna bring in these people and leave them as stragglers, because that's what this is. You're gonna take these people in and almost like trafficking. It's like human trafficking. You bring the people in and you just leave them to straggle. Oh, you gotta, go and find a job. You gotta go and do this. You gotta do this. Like, these are people from Syria. Totally different language, totally different culture, totally different essence of how they go day to day in our lives. Completely different. And you just want to mush them into our society and for us to all get along. Like, it just doesn't work. It does not work. And it doesn't matter where they came from. But this is the agenda by people like Justin Trudeau, like the globalists at the World Economic Forum. Let's remind, George Soros wrote that letter to the UK demanding more asylum seekers enter into the United Kingdom, demanding countries open their borders and flush people in. They didn't demand an end to the wars that are causing this. They're not demanding the damages that we're doing to these countries that are causing the mass migration. But no, they're demanding countries to open the borders to flood these people in.
Of compassion, it was a declaration of demographic intent. Now, under Trudeau's successor, Mark Carney, the trajectory is accelerating. Carney has added to his council of advisors the co-founder of a lobbying group that advocates for increasing Canada's population to 100 million by the year 2100. It's
Mark
a vision
Weissman.
rooted in raw numbers, not national interest, one that treats people as economic inputs in a spreadsheet rather than citizens in a shared culture. Canada's asylum system has been transformed from a shield for the persecuted into a pipeline for global migration, used to bypass traditional immigration channels. And as services collapse under the weight of uncontrolled demand, ordinary Canadians are told to accept it as inevitable, progress even. This isn't compassion, it is social engineering.
It is social engineering, folks. But luckily, because now they're recognizing this crisis, and places like the UK, they've so recognized this process that they have created that now their solution is, hey, we got to digital ID everybody. Because now we got to verify our citizens because there's so much mass migration. That's how we deal with things. We got to now ID everybody, put everybody into this blanketed kind of spreadsheet AI database that's going to monitor and control and mass surveillance everybody to solve a crisis that we have created. This is all part of this agenda. Do not be fooled to think that this is incompetency. Do not be fooled to think that this is just Trudeau being dumb and not knowing how borders work. No, this is all intentional. This is all intentional. I wish I had the video in the lineup here to show you Mark Miller, the immigration minister, who revealed on camera right in front of your face to tell you that this is intentional to prevent Canada from having a recession, that they want to replace the workers after they demonize the workers for not sticking with the COVID agenda. So you are being replaced. You are being replaced. And now with AI accelerating, and that's replacing the workforce, and now with, on top of that, tariffs that are moving companies from Canada to the United States, the Canadian workforce is dying. The Canadian workforce, the working class, the middle class that used to strive for generations in this country, that my parents, that your grandparents, your great-grandparents strived on. We were one of the most richest developed nations on earth, is crumbling in front of our eyes because of this. This is all social engineering. This is all globalism. This is neoliberalism to the core. And this is all intentional to replace you, because none of these people give a damn about you. They have no intention to serve you. They have no respect, no identity towards this country. So they're happy. They're more than go lucky to infiltrate a bunch of people into this country like an invasion and human traffic them for cheap labor for private companies to exploit these people while it screws off everyone else. And they just don't give a damn. These are malice people with the intentions of destroying the economy for their own benefit and walking away and laughing to the bank. They don't give a damn. They don't give a damn about us. They don't give a damn about Canadians. They don't give a damn about Americans. They don't give a damn about Europeans. They don't give a damn about migrants. They don't give a damn about immigrants. They don't care about anybody but their inner circle. What did George Carlin always told us? It's a club, and you ain't in it.